Hey guys, welcome to my channel. My name is Melissa Siegel. I'm a professor of migration studies, and this is a channel about all things migration. So today I want to talk about a really important topic that has been very topical in the news, and that has to do with a look at Afghanistan. So if you're interested in general on the history of migration in Afghanistan, and let's say the current, as in last year, situation with regard to migration in Afghanistan, you can check out my two different videos on those here. But right now in this video, I want to look at the support offered for people who have assisted foreign governments in Afghanistan, which is extremely important given the current situation in the country. It's very fast moving and many people are trying to flee since the Taliban has arrived. First off, I want to look at a little bit at a timeline of some of the events that have led to this current situation. Following from this, we'll look at the policies that have been dictated to helping those who have assisted various armed forces who have been fighting in Afghanistan over the last 20 years or so. And in particular, in this video, I want to cover the United States, the United Kingdom, France, the Netherlands, Germany, Canada, and Australia, as they were really the most prominent and active forces in Afghanistan. Of course, this is an ever-changing situation, and the information provided here may not be valid at the time of your viewing. So best efforts have been made, however, to ensure that the information is correct at the time of recording, which is Wednesday, August 25th, 2021. So please do check individual government websites to confirm details or get in touch with relevant local NGOs for up-to-date information as you might require. For those of you who are also watching this video and have more up-to-date information depending on when you're viewing it, please feel free to add information in the comments below that could be of use to viewers. So again, in this video, we are looking at support offered to people who have assisted foreign governments and especially foreign armed forces in Afghanistan. So let's look at a little bit of a timeline of events. Again, I'm not going to go back to 2001. If you're interested more in the history of migration and also the history of conflict in Afghanistan, you can check out many videos on that. I do also have a video on the history of migration in Afghanistan, so you can check that out. But let's go back to December 28th of 2014, which is a critical date because that is when NATO ended its combat operations in Afghanistan. With the NATO withdrawal, then we saw that most of the armed forces that stayed in Afghanistan were really there to train and support the Afghan security forces. There were a number of terrorist attacks. There were definitely reductions in the security situation over the next years. There were a series of attacks already in 2015, also before. But in January of 2019, the Afghan president said that more than 45,000 members of his country's security forces had been killed since he became leader in 2014. And many say the figure is far higher than actually was previously thought. In February 29th of 2020, the US and the Taliban signed an agreement, quote unquote, an agreement to bring peace to Afghanistan in Doha, Qatar. The US and the NATO allies agreed to withdraw its troops within 14 months if the militants or if the Taliban also upheld their side of the deal. In April of this year, so specifically April 13th of 2020, the US President Joe Biden announced that the US troops would leave Afghanistan by September 11th of 2021. So fast forward to August 16th of this year of 2021, in just over a month, the Taliban basically swept across Afghanistan, taking control of towns and cities all over the country, including Kabul. And Afghan security forces basically collapsed in the face of the Taliban advance. For many, the swiftness under which the Taliban took control of different regions, and especially how fast Kabul fell to them, what took a lot of foreign governments by surprise. Of course, you can argue whether or not that should have taken them by surprise, but this is what happened, and it was the realistic picture on the ground. So now let's look at each country one at a time. And we're going to start off now with the United States and the U.S. approach to dealing with people who have been working for them. So at the moment, there are two main routes when applying for refugee visa assistance from the US government. The first route is the special immigrant visa. So special immigrant visas were created by Congress in 2009, and they provide a route to immigrate for Afghans who worked with the US government. However, it has been widely reported that the application process is extremely onerous and seriously backlogged, and conditions are aggravated by chronic understaffing that happened during the Trump administration. The second route is the Refugee Admission Program, and this program is broader. It requires an employment relationship with the United States, which includes work with US-funded projects, non-governmental organizations, or the media. However, this possibility of protection comes with daunting logistical hurdles. So only Afghans outside of their country can apply. So this means that those at risk must first find a kind of safe harbor nation, and it means to support themselves during the preceding period that can take months and even years. And both of these routes are really known to have backlogs. However, President Biden has promised to speed up these programs. He has also started to make steps for reforms in general of the asylum process in the United States. Over 300,000 civilians in Afghanistan have worked with the Americans during the 20 years of U.S. occupation in Afghanistan, according to the International Rescue Committee. Over 15,000 Afghans and their families have already resettled to the United States through the Special Immigrant Visa Program, and another 18,000 applications were pending before the crisis. And it's very clear that that number is set to increase dramatically given the current situation now. There are also practical issues for those with correct papers. There are reports that people holding U.S. affiliated paperwork have been targeted by the Taliban as they make their way to the airport in Kabul, as the Taliban are known to be targeting former U.S. military or embassy employees. Now let's turn to the United Kingdom. So what's the situation with regard to the United Kingdom? So the UK government established a special resettlement scheme in April of 2020 for the current and formerly locally employed staff in Afghanistan. So this scheme is actually called the Afghan Relocation and Assistance Policy, or the ARAP scheme. So under this policy, any current or former locally employed staff who are assessed to be under serious threat to life are offered priority relocation to the UK regardless of their employment status, rank, or role, or the length of the time that they served. Since 2013, the UK has resettled over 3,300 Afghan staff and their families to the UK. But since June 22nd of 2021, the Home Office has also resettled more than 2,000 former Afghan staff and their families in the UK. This scheme is operating alongside the urgent cross-governmental effort currently underway to repatriate British citizens and their family members. The scheme is for locally employed staff who have worked in roles that would have exposed their identities and placed them at risk of reprisals as a result of their work for the UK government. The situation in Afghanistan has escalated quickly, and the government is considering its options so that the scheme continues to operate really at pace. The APAR applications can be made outside of Afghanistan in a third country, and there's no end date to the scheme, and people can make an application at any time. The government is also continuing to provide assistance to Afghans or Afghan staff who've been working in the British Embassy in Kabul. So in addition to this scheme, the UK government has said that overall they will take 20,000 refugees from Afghanistan over a 5-year period, and that women, children, and religious minorities will be prioritized. So while this pledge is great, it also comes with a 5-year timeline, which still gives plenty of room for difficulties and persecution during that time. The Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, has stated that the UK owed a debt of gratitude to all of those who have worked with us to make Afghanistan a better place over the last 20 years, and that many of them, particularly women, are now in urgent need of our help. So the scheme is similar in size and scope to the one for Syrians, under which 20,000 people have been resettled since 2014, prioritizing survivors of torture, people with serious medical conditions, and women with children. Now, there have been other kind of newsworthy events that have hit the news in the wake of this crisis. So in September, 35 Afghan students were actually due to take up places at British universities under the Chevening scholarship system. But the Foreign Office said that these were being deterred for a year because the UK embassy in Kabul could no longer administer their visas. And of course, this was a lifeline for the students who also were brilliant enough to be awarded these scholarships in the first place. And which is one of the reasons why it hit media attention, because basically the students felt like the rug had pulled out from underneath them and telling them they needed to defer a year. Well, we can see how fast things change in a country within a year. So, however, now, I think under pressure, Boris Johnson has later said that the government would try to make sure that they were admitted. We'll see what happens in that case. There are definitely some other issues at hand within the British case. So the criteria used by the British government has definitely come under scrutiny. Many security guards who guarded the British embassy have been told that they were not eligible for asylum in the UK, as they were employed through an outsourced contract, so not directly through the British embassy. So this is where we already start to see splitting of hairs, and where administrative rigmarole is really deterring the safety of Afghans. Now we can turn our attention to the case of France. So France began evacuating hundreds of people from Afghanistan in relative silence since April this year. This was in anticipation of the Taliban taking over Afghanistan. So the French embassy drew up a list of names of people who were eligible for evacuation. So former interpreters of the French army in Afghanistan were allowed to come along, drivers and kitchen staff from the embassy and others. The French Ministry of Foreign Affairs stated that we don't want to forget the people who worked for us. So in total, more than 600 Afghans and their relatives were taken to France in June and July of this year. So France will no longer also deport rejected asylum seekers in France back to Afghanistan due to the situation in the country. Now we can turn our attention to the Netherlands. So the Netherlands has relaxed some of its previously strict rules for accepting asylum claims for all former Afghans who helped the Dutch mission in Afghanistan. The cabinet wants to treat asylum applications for Afghans who worked for the Dutch mission in a similar way to those from Afghan interpreters. So originally, the Netherlands was only looking at Afghan interpreters that had worked for them and not a broader range of staff. And now they are taking into account a broader range. This will make it easier, of course, for other people to file an asylum claim in the Netherlands. A Dutch cabinet statement said that those persons who were hired for a long time by the Netherlands or who had a contract with the Netherlands will be treated on equal footing with interpreters if they apply for asylum in the Netherlands after evacuation. So of course, there are still a lot of practicalities and a lot of specificities that are not clear here, but it is good to see that they have opened up the grounds to more than only people who were interpreters. It's also clear that the Taliban doesn't make much of a difference between people or even how long they worked for embassies or foreign powers when looking for retribution. The Netherlands has also said that it will no longer deport rejected asylum seekers to Afghanistan. And we are seeing more and more, especially European governments, following this in suit. So even people who previously didn't have a claim to asylum are now not being deported, and we will see what happens also in their cases. The Dutch government said earlier that its entire local embassy staff of 207 people and their families had left Afghanistan and were on their way to the Netherlands after they had been unable to reach the airport for days due to the chaos outside of the gates, but these people have now been evacuated. There's still, well, at the time of this recording, there's still over 700 Dutch citizens in Afghanistan waiting to be evacuated. Now let's turn our attention to Germany. So in June, the German government announced that Afghans who worked for them from 2013 onwards may apply to come to Germany. And this was previously limited only to the past 2 years, but now has been extended to the period from 2013 on. So according to the Bundeswehr, which is the United Armed Forces of Germany and their civil administration and procurement authorities, over the last 2 years, 526 locally employed staff in Afghanistan have worked for them, and of these, 409 persons were given approval for admission, including almost 2,000 family members, and the overall figure amounts to 2,482 persons. According to the Joint Forces Operations Command, also 360 local Afghan staff and almost 1,500 family members have already arrived in Germany, and the applications of another 350 people are still being processed. It has been reported that Taliban fighters trying to track down Western-affiliated journalists have allegedly actually shot dead a family member of an editor working for the Deutsche Welle and seriously injured another family member. Other family members did manage to escape at the last minute and are now on the run, and the journalist who the Taliban were searching for had already relocated to Germany. But this really highlights that even family members of people who worked for foreign organizations are at direct risk from the Taliban. Now let's turn our attention to Canada. Canada actually already withdrew the bulk of its troops from Afghanistan in 2011, but still participated in a NATO mission to train the Afghan military until 2014. So over the past decade, 800 Afghans who assisted the Canadian Armed Forces have already been resettled to Canada. Some are, however, still in Afghanistan. And in recognition of their service to Canada, the Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada is implementing special immigration measures that will offer a path to protection in Canada for those at risk due to their work. And the work at Global Affairs Canada and the Department of National Defense is working to identify and assist individuals eligible for resettlement to Canada. Those eligible include interpreters who worked with the Canadian Armed Forces, cooks, drivers, cleaners, construction workers, security guards, and locally engaged staff employed at the Embassy of Canada in Afghanistan and their family members. So here the criteria are relatively broad, especially compared to some other countries. Criteria to be referred for resettlement are based on applicants' significant or enduring relationship with the government of Canada, and applicants must meet all usual admissibility requirements, including security checks, criminal and health screenings, and processing timelines that will hopefully be expedited. In addition to this, Ottawa has also said that it will bring 20,000 Afghan refugees to Canada, but has not provided a timeline as the Taliban forces continue to rapidly expand their control over the country. The refugees being brought from Afghanistan will be those most in danger, or they're prioritizing those in most danger. They will also include women leaders, human rights advocates, journalists, LGBTQ individuals, and those being persecuted based on religious grounds or religious minority groups, and families of interpreters already resettled in Canada. The Afghans will arrive through a family class sponsorship and government-assisted refugee programs, as well as private sponsorship schemes. If you're interested in more on the Canadian private sponsorship scheme, I will be coming out with a video on that soon, so do keep a lookout for that. And the Canadian plan covers both people who want to leave Afghanistan and those that are already in neighboring countries. Finally, to round off the country snapshots are in focus, or our focus on different countries, let's look at Australia. Australia has granted humanitarian visas to more than 100 Afghan nationals who worked at its embassies under the at-risk Afghan employee scheme. This includes embassy guards and full-time maintenance staff. It has, however, been reported that dozens of Afghan nationals who worked with Australia in Afghanistan but missed out on the visa for at-risk employees have been told that they have priority in the broader pool of 3,000 humanitarian places that Australia has committed to. So the move gives hope to those that have missed out and raises the prospect that some of the humanitarian places announced by the Australian government after the fall of Kabul to the Taliban last week could be taken by former interpreters and security guards blocked for the scheme for former employees. Some of the previous employees have been deemed ineligible for the at-risk scheme by the Australian government due to technicalities such as being a contractor rather than a direct employee or not applying in time. So we see that some of these technicalities or working for a third party that was then contracted to these embassies has caused some trouble for people who really should have easy access to these visas. In many of these schemes, we've seen issues of delays of many of the visa processes that have really plagued all of the nations attempting to evacuate former employees. There have also been complaints about backlogs and, really complicated and long-winded forms that people have to deal with. In most cases, however, nations have widened their acceptance of former employees. Previously, most nations only were accepting former interpreters, but now many countries are also accepting people from other positions such as drivers and cooks, or those who have had other affiliations with their countries. This is actually really important since the Taliban don't make much of a distinction to who you were when you were working for a foreign government or even how long you were working for them. So people that are associated with the West are already at much greater risk. So many nations have been criticized for not preparing for such an eventuality sooner, as they were aware of the withdrawal date. And nations such as France and Germany had already begun evacuations earlier this year, but others such as the US and the UK were not as organized. So there are some practical issues on the ground. Even if some people are eligible to be transported to a safe country, physically actually getting to the Kabul airport is quite difficult. Even though US forces are in control of the airport, all of the roads surrounding the airport are controlled by the Taliban. Regardless of the criticisms of particularly the US and the UK for not acting fast enough, as well as perhaps a number of other criticisms, the sheer number of people who have been evacuated in the last few days is nothing short of remarkable. So Britain's Ministry of Defense says it has airlifted out 8,500 people since August 13th, and the White House said that it has flown out 21,600 people on Monday, and more than 70,700 people have been flown out in total since the Taliban advanced on Kabul. So concrete dates when foreign troops are leaving have recently been announced. That is announced as of today, Wednesday, August 25th of 2021. The UK government has said that it will stop evacuating within the next 24 to 36 hours. France has said that it will close its mission on Thursday, so that is tomorrow. And also for the US, even though the withdrawal is officially next Thursday, most equipment and troops will be leaving this Friday. So of course, it still remains to be seen how many people are going to be able to be evacuated from the country by the withdrawal date of August 31st. So there's still a lot more to be seen here. For those of you who are watching this video and have more information also on the ground, please do leave that in the comment section. If you also have any additional information on how to help or where to get help, please do leave that in the comment section below. If you like this video, please, of course, like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any of my videos that I upload every week on different migration topics. I do hope to see you the next time. Bye-bye.